That's about the best that can happen with that. So I want to welcome everybody, especially welcome the Nathans back to California. And we are, as you can see, live today in person. We are going to be live tomorrow as well. And we're putting it up on Facebook. We have a screening tonight of a movie, though. So I have a really nice involved day from start to finish. About 12 hours from now, we're going to finish our Temple Beth Ami day. We're going to have our screening of The Fabelmans. So we have a long, eventful day. Mike, can you live stream us? His job. Do your job, sir. Wow. I'm looking at some of the stuff that we had on this computer the last time. We had one of the last times we were here, I'll show you. This was not Tuesday related, it was Wednesday related. We were talking about Robert Clary passing away. And I was talking about how all the characters on Hogan's Heroes that were the Nazis were all Jews. The difference is the only inmate that was Jewish was Robert Clary. So he was actually in a concentration camp too. So, but this was, I was saying, one of the worst. Most of the Nazis on the show were goofy and kind of funny. This one was not. This was General Burkhalter, and his parents were actually murdered in Treblinka. So you can imagine this guy getting dressed up in a SS uniform. How crazy that was. And he also lived a fairly long time too. If you see, he lived to be 98 years old. Not too bad. Not too shabby. So, yeah, some people on Hogan's Heroes lived a long time. Oh, wait, we have more people to let in. So anyways, yeah, so this was one of the last things we were looking at on the screen. But good morning to everybody, and
Good morning.
good to see you. We've got the Nathans here. For those that just joined, the Nathans are back in town, so we wanted to, we wanted to welcome them. The Nathans don't like coming on virtually, so they're only a brick and mortar kind of people. So they wanted to only be here in person. So we're glad that they're here, and yeah, it's good to have them back in town. Always adding a lot to our classes and our groups and our community. So we're very grateful that they're here. And is California any different now than when you were here last time, Nathan's? No?
Is it?
I don't know. Last time you were here, we were still kind of dealing with COVID in an aggressive way, right? No?
No, because when did we leave? In April?
Yeah.
Yeah, and then by
Yeah, I guess.
August, we were off to Africa, so.
And what did you think of your African safari? You were showing some.
Safaris.
It's pretty amazing.
We were I didn't get to see pictures, but you started showing some pictures of the
Yeah, there's a book.
so everybody who's been on safari, they have the 5 big animals you're supposed to see, right?
We didn't see a rhinoceros.
So the only one they didn't see is a rhinoceros. But which was the most impressive of the 5 that you saw, do you think?
The lions, cheetahs, the hyenas.
I don't think hyenas aren't part of. They're
Among the 5,
no.
The most impressive part of the trip
Yeah.
was the Serengeti and the Great Migration. That was overwhelming.
Wow.
Millions.
Those are hippos.
No,
Wil-
they're
wildebeest.
wildebeest and
Zebras.
zebras.
You can see I can't see from here. That was pretty amazing, huh? Seeing all those, the massive animals, huh?
Yeah.
It's just overwhelming.
Well, this was, yeah, I'm glad you got to do, that's definitely, they don't say a bucket list trip, but it's definitely a, I don't know. I guess you could say a bucket list trip.
People were great. And, we travel by ourselves. There are no tours. It's
No
just-
tours.
Just the Jeep, the guide, Phyllis and Ronnie.
Phyllis and Ronnie. And you didn't shoot anything. You only took pictures. Phyllis didn't shoot anything, she said. No, that's good. Well,
I
yes,
shoot with a camera.
with a camera. But yeah, it is a great trip. I think everybody should have a chance to see those kind of animals up close. It only makes you appreciate, them more obviously than, but I do say, people don't want animals in zoos and things like that. I don't know if we close down zoos, I really do think that there's going to be a detrimental effect on kids not having an ability. Like if you can't afford to go to South Africa or whatever, go to Africa.
Put kids in the zoo, let the animals.
Yeah.
And there are better ways to do zoos
Yeah,
than
no,
what
there's
used to be done.
there's no question. But I think if you don't have a zoo and, you don't have a Bronx Zoo, or if you don't have a zoo in Columbus or something like that, kids are never going to be able to have that appreciation for how amazing, life, the diversity of life is. So, I mean, I get the understanding that, the animals shouldn't be in captivity, but to some extent, we're only going to be able to save animals if people have an understanding of what they are and see them up close. So it's a tough, I feel bad for the animals, that the unlucky ones that get to be in captivity, but the reality is they,
Well, animal park, like down in San Diego, that's a good way to see.
yeah.
Right.
Yeah, but I mean, I still feel bad. I mean, like at the end of the day, you're,
It's better than those elephants.
Yes, it's-
in the LA Zoo. It's just-
I know.
And they have breeding programs in all these big zoos. Tampa has a breeding program.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, it's part of the discussion about, having compassion and care for animals, but it's one of these weird kind of things about, making people sensitive, you have to sensitize them by having to be exposed to them. So anyways, I get the argument and I don't dismiss the argument. I just would say, but the alternative is that kids will never see the animals and never understand what we're talking about. We're not talking about, again, I think that's how people
You should just
get it.
publish your book, Phyllis, and then,
Yeah. So last week, for those who were not with us last week virtually, we had a chance to read a really weird story in the Bible. Maybe one of the strangest stories. And I think it really like the level of detail in this story is a pretty wild story. And it's the story of the purge that the queen Ataliah, she takes power and kills off the entire family of Judah, the kings of Judah, including her own family. And she becomes queen. They find her one surviving grandchild, Jehoash, is spared and is raised for the first 6 years of his life in hiding, which is, oh, that was weird. And when they take him out of hiding, they install him as king and they kill Queen Ataliah. And that's kind of what we read about last week. That's kind of what we finished with. He was raised by the priests, and so he liked the priests. He favored the priests, but he also didn't like some things that the priests were doing, which were they were not taking care of the building. They were not taking care of the temple. And he tried to make them take care of it and make sure that they were funding the construction. So he He creates a capital campaign. He helps the temple be rebuilt.
He was only 7 years old.
Well, by the time he did this, he was already in his 20s and 30s.
Oh.
Now he reigns for 40 years, which is a
His first temple.
fairly long time. Yeah. And so this is about 840, 830 BC. So this is about 150 years after King Solomon. Definitely, if the temple hadn't had some good maintenance going on all along, it's 150 years old. So there's probably some maintenance that needed to be done, some upgrading, some serious upgrading that needed to be done. We haven't heard that there wasn't, but we also haven't heard that there was. And so he takes this on. It also, again, it shows his devotion to the temple and to God, because some of the previous people, including Altayahu, is worshiping other gods. It says so. And so here's a guy who's cares about God. He's a good king, but he also seems to run afoul of some people. How do we know that? Because it says that he reigned for 40 years and he took over when he was 7. So that means he died when he was 47. And one of the last things I suggested was he either was very sick at 47, or people made him very sick. And it was the latter. They made him very sick. There's Marcia. And Tim, welcome. So what we read about was the fact that we finished up with this discussion about how he rebuilt the temple. And this is the last thing we read about. And when we continue up here, right here in verse 18, we're going to see, I don't remember if we read this part, but we're going to read it now, which is kind of, I think, the place where we're going to begin, which is, again, King Joash. Let's just take a very quick look at something that we usually start with when we're going through these chapters. Just give me 1 second. I want to bring up the a list of kings real quick. So if we can direct our attention to the list of kings, we are right here, which is, let me just, I'm trying to make it big enough for you to see, but at the same time. So here's where we are. Queen Atalia takes over when her son Ahaziah gets killed. Remember, Yehu, the new king of Israel, killed both Joram and Ahaziah together. The Israel and Judah king, he killed both of them. His mother takes over. And again, we just read about this king, Jehoash, sometimes written with a H, with a hey, sometimes without. But he becomes king, and you can see he reigns for about 40 years. So we're in this period right now.
Very good.
Yeah, and this is based on what the Bible says about them. So this is all going on through the reign of King Yehu. This is where the chart is a little off, because he should still be, that's weird. He should still be king here. He's king all the way through almost to the end of Joash's reign. So you can see that Joash's son is going to take, Joash's son Amaziah is going to take over. And you can see the judgment on these guys, good and evil, good starting off good, but ending up evil. These kings over here, the kings of Israel, Yehu, they're going to say is good, and then the rest of them are just evil. These are all Yehu's family. This is the Yehu dynasty, and so this is where we are in this period right here. So what also isn't kind of, I think, displayed here, if you think about it, is that between Joash and his son Amaziah, we have a pretty long time of stability, right? We have two kings that reign for about, as you can see, about 68 years. That's a long time for two kings to reign. You know, given political instability and those kind of things, that's a fairly long time. Their son, Uzziah, you're going to see is also going to be king for about 30 years, 27 years. So if you look at those three kings together, you're going to get, you're going to get about 100 years of this consistent dynasty, which is pretty good in the ancient world. It's a pretty solid. I'm not sure what's happening with our screen, why it keeps wigging out, but it's a pretty solid and stable dynasty. But in the background, as we've been talking about, has been this guy and these people. Mike, do you want to see if the cord is connected? Can you see that? I'm not sure. You'll know. You'll figure that out. Mike is the most computer literate here, including me. He's more computer literate than I am. So, but let's take a look at this, Rosemary. If you want to continue with King Hazael, who's the king of Aram, which is modern day Syria. And Aram is constantly fighting with Israel. They're the northern kingdom. And as we're going to see here, they got all the way to Jerusalem, which means they went all the way through Israel and they got all the way to Jerusalem. And actually, as we're going to see, they went all the way to Gath, which was a Philistine city even further south. So the Aramean incursions into Israel are pretty substantial. So here is where we're going to continue on. Again, probably, let me just do one other thing for the sake of the time right now. This is screen went off. Okay, it should be coming up, but it's not. Can you see the map?
No.
Why is the map not coming up? We're having.
Are you on wireless, Mark?
No.
It might be a wireless connection.
No. It's. Let me try this map. Try sharing this one. There you go. So here's Damascus. This is the capital of Aram. And you can see they went all the way down here. That's actually not even the map that I would use, but I couldn't get the other map to come out. Let me try this one. I'll try this one. Try showing this map, which is the one I tried to share before. There we go. So this map shows you Aram. There's Aram here, and there it goes down to there's Gath right there. These are the Philistine cities. So Aram goes all the way down to here by this king. So that means all the north, he was able to go all the way through the north, and then he was able to go all the way into Judah.
Hey, Mark, could it be a projector?
It's
not happening
on the screen.
there's.
Yeah, it's not happening for you, but here our screen is wigging out occasionally. So hopefully, if I don't switch around a lot, maybe it'll work. All right, so Rosemary, if you pick up this again, basically he's telling us that the Arameans, the Syrians, are frequently making incursions into land. And remember, what's important about this guy, King Hazael, is we actually read about him. He was the one that Elijah and Elisha actually make king. And if you recall, Elisha actually says when he makes him king, he says, "This is crushing me to do this because I know how much violence you're going to visit on our people." But according to the Bible, Hazael, to some extent, is part of God's plan. And that's pretty important because the idea that even our enemies, to some extent, are part of God's plan is going to be very important by the end of this book, in the book of Kings, when we get to King Nebuchadnezzar of the Babylonians. And the idea that Nebuchadnezzar, to some extent, is an agent of God, is part of God's plan.
Isn't that what Jonah in that story is all about?
that our enemies become. they
Well,
have a plan.
what's interesting about the Jonah story is that,
I mean, he's saving them and they're going to end up.
well,
going down.
the question is had they already made the incursions, had the Assyrians, because in that story, the Jonah story, it's the Assyrians who are the enemies. Yeah, the question is, had they already made their incursions in? Were they doing something there? Or was the story more of an allegory to say even your worst enemies are capable of having goodness or times of goodness? So we don't know.
Hey, Mark.
Yeah.
Would it be helpful just to shut it down and turn it back on? That's always what everybody says to me. Just try it.
Well, I have a problem that if I do that, I think it's going to turn off for the people there, right?
I'm thinking it's up there.
Yeah, it's probably, yeah, guys, you don't see it, but
Yeah, that's why.
Oh, they don't, they're getting
our
a-
screen is getting, our screen is our projector is wigging out a little bit, so.
Hmm.
So, well, no, we'll give people Bibles if we have to, but Rosemary, if you would be so kind as to.
That
read
sounds
them.
terrible.
Yes,
It's happening a lot.
yeah, it's flickering.
Hmm.
Yeah, I know.
And I
Okay.
miss hearing those.
Well, I can still see it.
Hmm.
All right,
We just.
all right, Rosemary.
Okay. At that time, King Hazael of Aram came up and attacked Gath and captured it, and Hazael proceeded to march on Jerusalem. Thereupon, King Joash of Judah took all the objects that had been consecrated by his fathers, Kings Jehoshaphat, Jehoram, and Ahaziah of Judah, and by himself, and all the gold that there was in the treasuries of the temple of the Lord and in the royal palace. And he sent them to King Hazael of Aram, who then turned back from his march on Jerusalem.
I'll get. both.
Yeah, we're gonna get Bibles for everybody. Thanks. Yeah, so you can see what Joash does is he buys off the king, King Hazael. He pays him off so that he will leave Jerusalem alone. And it says that he took the objects that were consecrated by his fathers. Now, it doesn't say he took stuff that was from King David and King Solomon, but it does say that he did it from the other kings, the more recent kings of Judah, that he took those monies, those treasures, if you will, and he sent them to King Hazael, and he is able to buy some time. So we're 2 Kings verse 19. Now we're about to read 20. So everybody gets it? He pays a ransom. He pays a ransom, a king's ransom, if you will, but it's actually the temple stuff. So as much as he spent time rebuilding the temple, ironically now he's looting the temple in order to save Jerusalem. Now, most people would probably say, but he saved people's lives by buying them off. But he definitely is, he is definitely doing something here, which some people might think is not good. But here's what it says.
The other events of Joash's reign and all his actions are recorded in the annals of the kings of Judah.
Well, that doesn't say a whole lot other than, again, go read about it elsewhere. And we don't have that book, so we don't really know everything else that he did during his 40 years of reign, which is a long time. It's how long King David reigned for. Yeah.
His courtiers formed a conspiracy against Joash and assassinated him at Beit Milo that leads down to Selah. The courtiers who assassinated him were Yosakar, son of Shemaiah, and Jehozabad, son of Shomer. He died and was buried with his fathers in the city of David, and his son, Amaziah, succeeded him as king.
So he is assassinated. And the Bible actually provides us with the names of the people that assassinated him. Probably because at some point they're going to be held accountable for assassinating him, which does indeed happen. Yes. Very end, we're beginning of chapter 13 of 2 Kings, Kings 2. So
Page 751.
806,
Thank you.
chapter 13.
Got it.
We're about to start. So it says where he was killed. He was killed at the Beit Milo. If you look here, it says meaning of Hebrew uncertain. We don't know exactly what this is, but we believe this area, the Milo, part of Jerusalem, the city of Jerusalem, we believe we've found where this is, this site. And look, whatever you want to say about Joash, he definitely made some enemies within the court.
Right here.
Look, the fact that he's assassinated is pretty important. It doesn't happen a lot.
You're in 1 Kings, we're in 2 Kings.
Yes.
I just saw it here.
So the fact that he's assassinated is obviously pretty substantial, right? And I don't know. What do you think, folks? I mean, the fact is his grandmother got killed, and now he gets killed. We've read about the kings of Israel being assassinated. We've had several of them being killed, but this is really this is unusual that you have these kinds of assassinations going on in the kingdom of Judah, within David's family, because to some extent, because it's a family dynasty, these guys don't install somebody else, a non David family member. They kill the guy, assuming that the next guy is going to be somebody that they can deal with, or somebody that they're going to want to deal with. And it's the son Amaziah. So this is what happens. I mean, this is what happens with the assassination. They're not going to get, it's not like the assassinations of the king of Israel, where they put in a new dynasty. Jehu just installed himself. He assassinated the Omrid dynasty. He killed Ahab's family. He destroyed Ahab's family, and then he becomes king. They're not becoming king. This guy, Yozakar, is not, he's not made king. So let's take a look at what happens when he becomes king. Here we go, chapter 13.
In the 23rd year of King Joash, son of Ahaziah of Judah, Jehoahaz, son of Jehu, became king over Israel in Samaria for 17 years.
Yeah, and so what we just did is flip back to Israel. We flip back to Jehu's son, Jehoahaz, becoming king. So we went back in time a little bit to go to the northern kings. And here's what it says about this king. Okay.
He did what was displeasing to the Lord. He persisted in the sins which Jeroboam, son of Nebat, had caused Israel to commit. He did not depart from them. The Lord was angry with Israel, and he repeatedly delivered them into the hands of King Hazael of Aram and into the hands of Ben-Hadad, son of Hazael.
Yeah. And so the northern kingdom, because they are doing what's wrong, what's bad, at least according to the people in the south who edited this, they feel that King Hazael and then Hazael's son Ben-Hadad assault Israel because of it. Now, what did he do? He did what Jeroboam had done, which was establish the golden calves, right? He made people not worship in the south. So over and over again, that's the charge leveled against the kings in the north. They weren't letting people, or they weren't encouraging people to go worship in the south. Look, in the scheme of things, this doesn't really seem to be as bad as we're kind of being told it is, because it seems like Jehu and his family are actually pretty religious. They're pretty devout. Not only that, if you look at their names, they have God's name in their name. I mean, Jehu God has God's name right there. He is God. That's what his name means. Yehoahaz means I have a holding, I have a possession within Adonai. I have a place within Adonai, within the Lord. I mean, these are very, seem to be devout Israelites, but they're still doing the wrong thing because they're worshiping the golden calves, and they're worshiping at the golden calves. I wouldn't say necessarily they're worshiping the golden calves, but they're worshiping them in those places, and that's a sin. And not only it's a sin for them, but they're causing Israel to sin because they're not allowing people to worship in Israel. So they're punished. And here's what it says.
But Jehoahaz pleaded with the Lord, and the Lord listened to him, for he saw the suffering that the king of Aram inflicted upon Israel. So the Lord granted Israel a deliverer, and they gained their freedom from Aram, and Israel dwelt in its homes as before. However, they did not depart from the sins which the house of Jeroboam had caused Israel to commit. They persisted in them. Even the sacred post stood in Samaria.
Yeah. Now here's again the fact that, for whatever you want to say, they do I'm going to turn this off. They do get delivered. The Arameans do stop attacking them. And so this is a really good thing. But again, they did have a problem, which is they're still worshiping the golden calves, or at the golden calves. And according to this, though, there was a sacred post that was in the capital at Samaria. Now that might have been, worshiping other gods, or at least worshiping God the wrong way. So that's not a good thing. That could have been a problem. Here's what it says about these guys.
In fact, Jehoahaz was left with a force of only 50 horsemen, 10 chariots, and 10,000 foot soldiers. For the king of Aram had decimated them and trampled them like the dust under his feet. The other events of Jehoahaz's reign and all his actions and his exploits are recorded in the annals of the kings of Israel. Jehoahaz slept with his fathers, and he was buried in Samaria. His son, Joash, succeeded him as king.
Yeah, not a whole lot about Jehoahaz. He seems like a pretty good king, actually, overall. He does get the Arameans to leave him alone in the north. Yeah. So he does get them off their back. And, again, we have this fact that it's in the book, the annals, which we don't have. All it says, again, is he died. He's buried with his fathers, and his son becomes king. So those are all pretty good things. I mean, again, he continues to let people worship in the north, and he also, as you can see, to some extent, the fact that he loses so many soldiers is kind of an endorsement that he was not a good guy, or he did bad things too. But overall, it's not a whole lot we know about him, but he seems okay.
Do they know where the tombs are?
Of the northern kings, that's a great question. No, we don't. How to explain this in a not offensive way?
Oh, offend away.
The problem we have. Okay, it says that he was buried in Samaria, right? Let's
Somewhere up there.
yeah, well, let's explain that real quick.
Who has that one name?
That's what I was going to tell you. That is, let me show you right now. I will show you on the map what we're talking about. So when we look at the map, here's Israel, right? And so the areas that we're talking about where we'd have to excavate are in this area right here.
We're not seeing that.
Oh, I don't know why it's not showing up on our, you guys see the map, right?
Nope.
You see it either? Huh. That's weird. There we
Yeah,
go.
now I see it.
Yeah, so this is the area that we'd be looking at. And the problem is that this area is the heartland of the Palestinian territories. So they're not going to let us come in and excavate these areas. So there are, well,
It's always been Palestinian land.
no. So here's the border. That's the West Bank, the border back into Israel. So this area, this line right here, if you follow this line, which is not really doesn't follow a river or anything like that. It's kind of a fairly arbitrary line. That's the West Bank. So this is the border of the West Bank. Okay, so this area that we're talking about, where the kings lived, is in this area right here. So the two biggest cities in the West Bank are this city right here, Jenin, and Nablus. Now, when you hear about stuff going down in the West Bank, like people being killed in battles, it's in these two places. These two places are the most violent, dangerous places. If you ever watch the TV show Fauda, that's where that stuff takes place. When you get closer to here, when we get closer to Jerusalem, these areas are all very heavily populated, but they're within the control or the, it's not the right word. They're within the easy proximity of Jerusalem. So here's Jerusalem. Here's Al Birat, which is a Palestinian city or camp, whatever you want to call it. And here's Beit El, which is a Jewish outpost settlement, which is where the ancient city of Beth El was in the times that we're reading about, right? Beth El was the southern boundary of the northern kingdom. So this area right here was where the boundary was between Israel and Judah. So this area, interestingly, is still kind of somewhat Jewish. This is the area that we're talking about when we talk about the status of Jerusalem. If you look here, Har Shmuel, Givon, Yeshana, Givat Zev, Beit El, Giva Benyamin. These are all Ma'ale Adumim down here. These are all Jewish areas, which are going to be Jewish areas, probably whatever the status of Jerusalem is. And then these areas right here are Palestinians, surrounded by these Jewish settlements and cities. Okay, so those are all Jewish, and then this is Palestinian. But once you get up here, you have occasional Jewish cities. You have Ariel, you have Givat Harel, you have, this is just Givat 725 because it's an outpost. Kedumim, Emmanuel, Chavot Yair. But around this are some pretty big Palestinian cities. Nablus here, Kabatia here, Jenin. These are all Tubas, Tamun. These are all Palestinian areas
To
And-
this day,
to this day, and these are the biggest ones. So if you look at Nablus, I mean, it's not huge by standards of a city, but this is a major Palestinian town, city. And so this area right here, there's a lot of Jewish sites underneath these areas. But they won't be excavated anytime soon. I'm not saying they won't be one day. I don't know. But anytime in the near future that we can envision, they won't be excavated. I don't know what to tell you other than why will they not be excavated? Because they're under Palestinian control. They're too far away from the major cities of Israel, right? So this is 25, 30 miles from Jerusalem to Nablus, another 10, 15 miles to Jenin. But you're not that close to the major urban centers of Israel. They're not going to, I mean, nobody's going to come into this area to excavate. And the Palestinians absolutely 100% do not want these places excavated.
But what about in the ancient days? I mean,
They don't want these places excavated. Now they don't.
Now they don't. What about back in the day?
They would have, who knows? But that doesn't matter. Doesn't matter what it would have been like 200 years ago. Today, they will not let excavations go on because any of those excavations, which then affirm the presence of the Jewish people in those cities, is a complete problem for the Palestinians. They don't want it excavated. It completely goes against the political agenda to let those places be. I mean, there is no reason to. Now you could say, well, maybe they could get some money to have it excavated. That is true. 100% they'd get money. No question, they get money. It's not worth it because of what the consequences of it will be, which will be people saying, but these were Jewish cities 2,000 years ago. Look, most Israelis are not going to say, hey, that means we have to come back and take them again. But there are some who will. And again, it still undermines the psychology of the mentality of the people saying, well, this is Palestinian homeland. But this is the heartland of the Palestinian people. These places that we're reading about right now are the Palestinian heartland. So I like if I overlay the well, it's not even showing right now, but if I put up the if you look at the map, which I'm trying to show, which for some reason the tribes map is not showing. Let me do this. So if you look at these places, Samaria, Shiloh, Shechem, Beth El. If you look at those places, this is the heartland of Palestinian territory right here. This is the West Bank. So how are you going to go in and dig underneath those places? Not going to happen. It's not going to happen anytime soon. To answer your question, we will not find their burial sites soon. Maybe one day. And again, at the end of the day, is it worth killing people over finding a tomb for the king? I don't know. It's a tough one. I love archaeology, but I don't love people getting killed. So here's the, I mean, I don't want to simplify it like that. Maybe that sounds overly simplified, but that's just a fact. People will die if we push it. So, all right. So I guess they'll die if we don't push it, but more people might die if we push it. All right. So here's what happens back to, oh no, we're still with the northern king. Sorry. So we're with, Joachaz's son, Joash, which is also confusing because there was a northern king. I mean, the southern king was Joash too, but here's the the other the other Yoash, which is why I think they went with the Yoash versus Yehoash. But anyways, let's read it.
In the 37th year of King Joash of Judah, Jehoash, son of Jehoahaz, became king of Israel in Samaria for 16 years. He did what was displeasing to the Lord. He did not depart from any of the sins which Jeroboam, son of Nebat, had caused Israel to commit. He persisted in them.
Yeah. So again, it says he didn't depart, which means he didn't stop people from worshiping in the northern shrines. I don't know. Here's what it says.
The other events of Joash's reign and all his actions and his exploits in his war with King Amaziah of Judah are recorded in the annals of the kings of Israel.
Whoa, wait. Let's before we move on, because it just moved on. It just basically said, oh, read the next line. That's really.
Joash slept with his fathers, and Jeroboam occupied his throne. Joash was buried in Samaria with the kings of Israel.
Okay, so Joash dies. So there's Yehu, then Joahaz, and then Joash. So Joash is the third king of this Yehu dynasty. But wait, wait a second. What? His war with King Amaziah?
When did that happen?
We haven't read it yet. So we jump forward, we jump back, and now we've jumped forward because we have not read about this. We are about to read about it, but we now are told. And that's why when I titled this class, I said North versus South again. Because we do read about this fight initially long ago, 100 years ago, between King Asa and King Baasha of the north. King Asa of Judah and Baasha of the north. And they fight against each other. They actually, Israelites and Judites kill each other. And this is another round of this. Now, again, sometimes they're close. We read about how the Omrid dynasty, the Ahab's own daughter was married. I mean, Atalyahu was a northern queen. She was a northern princess, if you will. I mean, she came from the north. So they married into the dynasty. I mean, right now, the king of Judah is related to the Omrid dynasty. So sometimes they got along really well, really well. Sometimes they fought in battles together, like we read about at the beginning of Kings, when they go to war against Mesha in Moab. So sometimes they fight together, sometimes they marry each other. But right now, we're going to read about how they fight against each other.
Elisha?
But wait, we're going back to the prophet, because we haven't heard from Elisha or the prophets in a while, but we're about to hear a little story.
Elisha had been stricken with the illness of which he was to die, and King Joash of Israel went down to see him. He wept over him and cried, "Father, Father, Israel's chariots and horsemen." Elisha said to him, "Get a bow and arrows," and he brought him a bow and arrows.
Yeah, well, it seems like King Joash of the north is not only a good Jew, but he seems to really like Elisha. He seems like a good guy. I don't know what's going on with the northern kings. The southern writers don't seem to like him a lot, but they definitely seem to like Elisha, and they like the prophets, or they like at least this prophet, because this guy goes down, the king goes down to see Elisha while he's sick. And he's upset about it. So Elisha tells him to go get bow and arrows. Here's what he does.
Then he said to the king of Israel, "Grasp the bow." And when he had grasped it, Elisha put his hands over the king's hands.
That's a pretty wild scene. He's dying, he's sick. He gets a bow and arrow. He tells him to go get a bow and arrow. He gets the bow and arrow. And while Elisha is maybe in bed or dying or whatever, they do this ritual of grasping a bow and arrow. Very powerful prophetic act.
"Open the window toward the east," he said. and he opened it. Elisha said, shoot, and he shot. Then he said, an arrow of victory for the Lord, an arrow of victory over Aram. You shall rout Aram completely at Aphek. He said, now pick up the arrows, and he picked them up. Strike the ground, he said to the king of Israel, and he struck 3 times and stopped.
Wow. So it's a good omen. It's a little omen, right? You know, you're going to have an arrow of victory. And then he picks up the arrows, he brings them back, and he tells them to strike the ground with the arrows. So he strikes the ground 3 times. Yeah. Yeah. Well, we don't know exactly how old he is, but we do know that Elisha is alive during, because
He's more.
oh no, even Elijah, who gets carried up, seems to have, like, he's done with his time as a human being, you could argue. I don't know. Elisha is has been king since he overlaps with Elijah, but he becomes the main prophet during Ahab's time and during Ahab's son, 2 sons who are king, Ahaziah. Here, I'll
I mean, we were talking about 60 years, 70 years of reign between 3 and Elisha was part of all that.
yeah, well, Elisha starts during Ahab's time. He starts up here and he goes all the way through Ahaziah, Yoram, now Yehu, who he told Yehu he was going to be king, Jehoahaz, and Joash. So he's king all the way up through here. So he's prophet all the way through that king through Joash. So you're talking about, well, not since the beginning of Ahab's time, right? So Ahab was king for about 20 years, but let's say,
Nobody lived that long is my hope.
well,
That's-
this is about, well, he's been, it's not that far. It's about 50, it's about 60 years. It's a long time, but it's not like 100 years. We're not getting into, I can't believe how long these people lived. It's not, you don't have that anymore, which again, some people will say is an indicator that this isn't really mythic
Well, that's
anymore.
what I'm thinking.
But this is all well within the realm of how old he can be, because I don't think it actually said how long Joash was
Seems like he's been
king
around a
for.
long
He has
time.
been, because he's been around for all those kings. But remember, some of those kings were not kings for very long.
And where are these prophets when all this goes on?
Where are they living?
Yeah. They seem to have a grip on what's going on.
Yeah, they probably lived in lots of different places. Some of them seem to have lived in communes, if you will. They lived with other prophets, right? But some of them also seem to live with average, ordinary, everyday people, at least for some points, because we saw that Elisha did that, Elijah did that. It seems like there were some prophets who were loners, and there were others who hung out with people. And it seems like, probably they started their own schools or their own disciples, had their own disciples based on what we see. But it's not really clear, because this book is not being told from the vantage point of the prophets, right? We did read a lot about Elisha. We read a decent amount about Elijah, but we did follow Elisha for a while. But even then, it's always with the kings in the background. It's always with the power, the political power in the background. The other kings, even, right? Hazael and these other kings of Aram, Hadadezer and Ben-Hadad, these other kings are in the background. They're in the background. It's always about kind of their role as tellers, speakers to power.
Have no ways to communicate. Even 25 miles seemed like it was forever.
Probably.
away. But yet they still had some for, maybe it was just informants that are going back and forth and.
They definitely have informants. They definitely know what's going on, but they're also prophets, Marcia, which means they know what's going on because God told them, right?
And it doesn't
They get a
even-
vision.
The annals of the King David.
Well, that's what it says about these guys. And these stories were in there too, but they're, again, the kings are always in the backgrounds in these stories, if you think about it. So he's struck the ground 3 times. Well, wait a second.
The man of God was angry with him and said to him, if only you had struck 5 or 6 times, then you would have annihilated Aram. As it is, you shall defeat Aram only 3 times. Elisha died and he was buried. Now bands of Moabites used to invade the land at the coming of every year.
Yeah. So it doesn't say how much after he dies that this happens, but we assume this is pretty close to the end of Elisha's life. Elisha, like Elijah, gets mad at people. And, look, it's not that he doesn't have a reason to be mad at people, but he does seem to get mad at people. And, poor King Joash did not know that this was a test. He did 3 times, which at least shows he had kavanah or intention in doing it. But according to, again, Elisha, tells him after the fact, hey, if you had struck with the arrows a bunch of times, you were really going to annihilate them. You really needed to show your full energy on this. Whatever. I don't know what to say other than it seems like an explanation for why King Joash is good at what he does in defending the Israelites, but he's not able to completely wipe them out. Which again, it doesn't seem quite fair that he didn't know that he had to do it a lot of times. Elisha didn't tell him that, but
Do the Moabites, invade the land during, harvest?
probably. And if you look at the note, probably just going to say, yeah, year by year.
By year.
Yeah, no, but here it says at the coming of the year. It also can mean every year. Mary, what does yours say? At the coming of the year? Which,
Bounty.
well, it could be because in those days it was Passover, right? So it was in the biblical period, it was Passover, it was the beginning. So it would make sense that they came in. And again, this doesn't seem to be an organized army. These seem to be raiders, right? These are Bedouin raiders, if you will. And the Moabites are doing it regularly, though. There seems to be that this is what happens. I guess some people would say that maybe it happens once Elisha dies, but because it's in the same sentence. So, I mean, that's one of the commentaries is that this starts to happen after he dies. But it also seems to be, no, this is kind of a regular thing that they have to deal with, which obviously we're now going to figure out how to deal with it. Or again, what do we learn from this? Well, here's a story, if you will.
Once a man was being buried when the people caught sight of such a band. So they threw the corpse into Elisha's grave and made off. When the dead man came in contact with Elisha's bones, he came to life and stood up.
Yeah, so that, again, it doesn't say a lot about the Moabites, but other than, again, look, for people who are looking for connections, this is an example of Elisha's powers. And, the Moabites are there really only because they're a background of this story of the fact that Elisha's powers continue even after he dies. So raising people from the dead is pretty amazing. Raising people from the dead.
This kind of throws cold water on a Christian.
Yeah, because we did read about Elijah and Elisha bringing people back from the dead. They both bring kids back from the dead, right? But This is literally crazy in the sense that a body is thrown on top of his body, which is kind of weird, by the way, that they would, but again, they say, look, it was a crisis. It wasn't like they wanted to do it. They had to do it quick. But yeah, even coming into contact with him, he could resurrect people. So yeah, it's pretty wild. It's taking it to a whole nother level.
Was this corpse that they put there some kind of a figure or just
Doesn't say, just a random guy.
random?
Yeah.
So because they want to hopefully worship that person or?
No, they threw the guy in there because they had to bury the guy fast because the raiders were coming. They threw it in there, and that's why they did it. So it's an excuse of why they did it. The whole thing about the Moabites is really just an excuse for why they had to do it. But it's just, the point is that even his body is able to bring people back to life. So this is just crazy. Now we get back to what happens with these people.
King Hazael of Aram had oppressed the Israelites throughout the reign of Jehoahaz. But the Lord was gracious and merciful to them, and he turned back to them for the sake of his covenant with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. He refrained from destroying them, and he still did not cast them out from his presence.
Yeah, so here's a reminder that God did not treat the Israelites as he kept them in their place. He did not exile them. He did not destroy them. Of course, that is about to happen. It's going to happen in about 50 years with the Assyrians. But up till now, they haven't done it. And it says that God did it because God remembered the covenant with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Here's what it says about King Hazael.
When King Hazael of Aram died, his son Ben-Hadad succeeded him as king, and then Jehoash, son of Jehoahaz, recovered from Ben-Hadad, son of Hazael, the towns which had been taken from his father Jehoahaz in war. 3 times Joash defeated him, and he recovered the towns of Israel.
Which is exactly what Elisha said, that he'd have 3 victories against the Arameans. And what he does is he takes back lands that were conquered by Hazael. So when Hazael dies, it creates a vacuum, and Joash is able to reconquer area, right? Parts of the north that had fallen to Aram. So that's a good thing. And we heard that, we heard that was going to happen. Now, as we get into chapter 14, we're going to go back. First we're going to have this reminder.
In the 2nd year of King Joash, son of Jehoahaz of Israel, Amaziah, son of King Joash of Judah, became king.
Yeah, and so now this is back to Amaziah and back to the kingdom of Judah. Now, what do we know about him?
He was 25 years old when he became king, and he reigned 29 years in Jerusalem. His mother's name was Jehoadan of Jerusalem.
Yeah, he's young when he becomes king. So when his father dies, when Joash dies, he's 25. He becomes king and he reigns for 30 years, which means if you do the math, he also doesn't live a super long time, right? He's going to make it just into his, he doesn't make it to 60, right? He's 54, 55 when he dies, so that's not good. We do learn that his mother's name is Jehoadan. We don't always get mom's name. Sometimes we do, but a lot of times, we don't. Definitely with the kings of Israel, we don't get their names. It's like it's almost like not even important who the moms are. But in Judah's case, we do sometimes get the names of their moms. And let's read about this King Amaziah.
He did what was pleasing to the Lord, but not like his ancestor David. He did just as his father Joash had done. However, the shrines were not removed. The people continued to sacrifice and make offerings at the shrines.
Yeah, so he's good. He's just not as good as King David. And specifically, what does he do? He doesn't stop people from worshiping in their backyard, which again, by our standards, relatively, we'd say not such a big deal. That's the worst thing the guy does, is he doesn't force people to only worship in Jerusalem. Well, if you're a priest from Jerusalem and somebody who wrote this book, it's not good, because you're taking away money and power from the priests. So he's not, he's good. God likes him. He's not worshiping other gods, but he is also not forcing people to worship in Jerusalem. So by that, he's not great. He's not good enough. It's good, but he's not good enough.
Once he had the kingdom firmly in his grasp, he put to death the courtiers who had assassinated his father, the king. But he did not put to death the children of the assassins, in accordance with what is written in the book of the teaching of Moses, where the Lord commanded, "Parents shall not be put to death for children, nor children be put to death for parents. A person shall be put to death only for his own crime."
So it says that he put to death the people who killed his dad. That's why we knew who they were, because they were brought to justice. But it does say that he did not punish their families, which is a really good thing. And if you look, why? It's in Devarim, it's in Deuteronomy. You don't kill a kid for what their parents did. Well, this is pretty substantial, though, because we don't see this a lot in the Bible, where it actually says it's written in the Torah. He says, I'm not going to kill these kids. And he's following the Torah. That's what it says. Kakatuv b'sefer Torah Moshe. And that's specifically what it says. It's written in the Torah. And that's why we don't do it. Now, here's the problem. Is the Torah Moshe all of the Torah, or is it the book of Deuteronomy? That's a little bit of a problem. We don't know for sure. But what's interesting is, according to our understanding of the book of Deuteronomy, or at least what's the right word? The scholarly consensus on the book of Deuteronomy shouldn't have existed yet.
Right, because it's first discovered 100 years later.
Yes, by King Josiah, still to come. So what's interesting here is that this kind of goes against that idea that it would have been written at least during that time. But could an editor or could the writer have said, it's in the book of Deuteronomy? If this history is what we call the Deuteronomistic history, it makes absolute sense that they would say that. Because if this was essentially written down during the time of King Josiah or slightly after, of course they're going to say it's in the Bible. But notice they didn't say it's in the Torah by itself. They said it's in the Torah, the teaching of Moses. And that's the word that's used, Sefer Torah Moshe. I can only tell you this. This doesn't tell us, it doesn't tell us 100% when it was written. It doesn't tell us 100% who wrote the Bible. I want to make it really clear. But it does tell us, and it is consistent with the idea that the people who wrote this knew what was in a Torah of Moses. And whether that Torah of Moses was Genesis through Deuteronomy, or whether it was Deuteronomy, nothing in that phrase that we just read is problematic. It all is consistent. It's either consistent with the traditional understanding of it, or it's consistent with the idea that the biblical scholars have, that this was written around 580, 570. So, but it is interesting, again, that it does refer to that. And it does also show, whatever you want to say, that King Amaziah is following the Torah. He's doing good stuff. He's doing what a king is supposed to do. He's following the Torah. He's deferring to the Torah. But he puts these guys to death, What's interesting is he put them to death. What it says, he put it to death when he firmly had control of the kingship. What are they talking about? Well, first of all, it says that he was 29 years old when he became king. So it was sometime into this that he did it. The people that he killed, if you think about it, were the people who installed him as king in the first place. They knew what they were getting when they killed his father, which is either they conspired with or without the son to allow this to happen. But he definitely punished the people who essentially installed him as king. I mean, that's all I can tell you, is he knew the people, they made him king. So he had power. He was able to finally, whenever he was able to feel he was strong enough to get rid of these people who were obviously pretty powerful, he killed them. Yep.
He defeated 10,000 Edomites in the Valley of Salt, and he captured Selah in battle and renamed it Yoktiel, as is still the case. Then Amaziah sent envoys to King Jehoash, son of Joahaz, son of Jehu of Israel, with this message: "Come, let us confront each other."
Yeah. So he goes to war against the Edomites. He defeats them. He defeats them a lot. He defeated a lot of them, 10,000. That's a lot. And he captures areas inside in the Edomite territory, which again, to remind people, just show real quick on the map. See if I can get that. Oh. Let me just share this map real quick. Do you see the map yet?
Nope.
No.
I think I know exactly where.
Well, you can't see it because this will be fixed by next week, or those will be fixed soon because
There it
he's fantastic at it. Michael does a great job. So here's a dome. This is the areas that he conquered. He conquered down here and down here by the Dead Sea. And so that's what he does. And we already knew, because we've already been told, that Amaziah and King Joash of Israel are going to get to war against each other. We don't really know what the issue was, but Amaziah says, let's go to battle. He's not saying come and confront each other in a nice way.
Hmm.
This is,
Let's you and me fight.
let's you and me take it outside.
Well, there wasn't much else to do except fight.
It's not very nice.
King
Okay.
Jehoash of Israel sent back this message to King Amaziah of Judah. The thistle in Lebanon sent this message to the cedar in Lebanon: "Give your daughter to my son in marriage." But a wild beast in Lebanon went by and trampled down the thistle. Because you have defeated Edom, you have become arrogant. Stay home and enjoy your glory, rather than provoke disaster and fall, dragging Judah down with you.
Yeah, so King Joash's message back to Judah, back to King Amaziah, is he uses an analogy. He says, you're literally like you're a little bramble, you're a little bush, and you come against the cedar of Lebanon, the most powerful, most amazing tree. You're nothing. And again, maybe part of what the fight was this thing right here, which is this issue of marrying between the kingdoms. And maybe there was a rebuff of a marriage prospect. And this is what caused them to go crazy. And he basically tells them, you back off, you think you're a big shot because you defeated the Edomites, but you're nothing. And he says, if you fight with me, you're going to bring disaster. So he tells them to back off. He says, yeah, you won a battle, but that doesn't mean you can fight against us. What's interesting again is that we've already read that the Arameans had taken away a lot of the armies of the north. They had at times completely, wiped out their armies. Now we know that this guy, Joash, is able to defeat the Arameans. He's able to have 3 victories against them. So he's also a pretty good general, pretty good leader of the troops. And he seems to be doing okay in his own right. But look, what is the relative strength of Judah if the kingdom of Israel, even after suffering losses to the Arameans, can still turn around and say to them, you stay back. Don't even think about coming up here. So what is it how strong was Judah if Israel can say that? Yeah. So here's what happens.
But Amaziah paid no heed. So King Jehoash of Israel advanced, and he and King Amaziah of Judah confronted each other at Beth Shemesh in Judah. The Judites were routed by Israel, and they all fled to their homes.
Yeah, it did not work out well. Now remember, this story is written by people in Judah. So it was probably even worse because this is their take on it. Not a good ringing endorsement of King Amaziah and his decision to go into battle. So it says that they actually fought within Judah. Beit Shemesh is in the territory of Judah. It's not far from Jerusalem. It's in the south, which means that they didn't even battle in the north. It's not like they had an incursion. It's almost like Amaziah says, you want to fight with me? And then he goes, yeah, fine, I'll come and fight with you, and I'll fight with you in your territory, and I'll destroy you in your territory. So it was really bad if you think about it for Judah. I mean, this was not even like they didn't even get to leave home.
King Jehoash of Israel captured King Amaziah, son of Jehoash, son of Ahaziah of Judah, at Beth Shemesh. He marched on Jerusalem, and he made a breach of 400 cubits in the wall of Jerusalem, from the Ephraim gate to the corner gate. He carried off all the gold and silver and all the vessels that were there in the house of the Lord and in the treasuries of the royal palace, as well as hostages, and he returned to Samaria.
Yeah, so Amaziah actually and the Judites pay a tremendous price for this war, which is that whatever they had been able to save in the last few years, since they had to pay off Hazael, since his father had to pay off Hazael, now Amaziah has to watch his treasures get taken out of the palace again. So assuming, he got money in the battles against the Edomites, whatever, I mean, he save up money, they get treasures, people bring in their monies as it's a bank. Remember, I mean, the royal palace served as a bank for people, and people get taken away. It says they took away hostages. So this is a disaster. And of course, their wall of Jerusalem, which again tells us that even back then there was a pretty substantial wall around Jerusalem, that wall gets destroyed too, which means that again, if they want to come back, they can come back anytime they want because they just turned down their wall.
The other events of Jehoash's reign and all his actions and exploits and his war with King Amaziah of Judah are recorded in the annals of the kings of Israel. Jehoash slept with his fathers and was buried in Samaria with the kings of Israel. His son Jeroboam succeeded him as king.
Interesting. And that's going to be now the 4th in the dynasty of Jehu. So you have Jehu, then you have Jehoahaz, then you have Jehoash, and then you have Jeroboam. Now it's interesting. He's Jeroboam II. And he's not a relative of Jeroboam the first, Jeroboam ben Nebat. This is Jeroboam ben Jehoash. He is the second king of Israel named Jeroboam. And we keep hearing about King Jeroboam, right? Everybody's bad like King Jeroboam, who made the golden calves. King Jeroboam was the king who rebelled against the north in the first place. So they just named their son, Joash's son is named after the guy who started the northern kingdom in the first place, which if you think about it is a pretty substantial name. It's literally like naming your kid George Washington. So that's his name. I named my son George Washington after George Washington. I did. If I did. I also didn't rebel again. I'm not a king. Yeah, I'm not a king. Not a king. No. He's buried in Samaria with the rest of his kings. Again, we don't know where exactly it is.
Kind of like Abraham Lincoln naming his son Jefferson Davis.
Maybe, well, no, because they're from the same kingdom. No, they're from the same kingdom. They're from the north. So they're both northerners. It'd be like Abraham Lincoln naming his son George Washington. It's people recognizing their historical ancestors, even if they're not their biological ancestors. And they're saying, look, my son is going to be like a king like Jeroboam, and he's going to be a strong king. Now, back to Amaziah in the south.
King Amaziah, son of Joash of Judah, lived 15 years after the death of King Jehoash, son of Jehoahaz of Israel. The other events of Amaziah's reign are recorded in the annals of the kings of Judah.
Yeah, we don't learn much else about him. And they're basically saying that he dies 15 years later. Amaziah lives 15 years over Jehoash. And that means Amaziah overlaps with Jeroboam. And that's it. I mean, it basically says Amaziah goes to war against the north, and that's pretty much all we know. And went to war against the Edomites, and that's all we know. But let's read about Amaziah.
A conspiracy was formed against him in Jerusalem, and he fled to Lachish, but they sent men after him to Lachish, and they killed him there. They brought back his body on horses, and he was buried with his fathers in Jerusalem, in the city of David.
So we read about another king of Judah who got assassinated. And as we said, he was 54, 55 years old when he got assassinated. So he was assassinated. His father was assassinated. It tells us that there was more stability in the north than there was in the south. Now, again, these guys were king for, 2020. It's not like they were not kings for a good amount of time, but still, they don't get to live out a long life. Their kids get to be king after them, which is not always what happens when you have a coup, as we've seen in the north. Because when somebody in the north has a coup, they put themselves in charge. They start a new dynasty. There's a new dynasty. There's new people, like Yehu, what Yehu did. That's not the case here. So the difference is that there's murder and coups and assassinations. It's not good, for sure. But the dynasty of David doesn't stop. So whether it's a 7-year-old kid or a kid in his 20s, they're going to install another member of David's house. So there's not stability. I don't want to say that there's stability, but at the same time, the dynasty continues. And that implies a certain stability that's inherent in the system, which is not what's in the system in the north, which is if there's going to be a coup, and there's going to be a coup in the north, the next king, without ruining it, then the system is in place even if there's changeover. That the system of having a descendant of David be on the throne is necessary and is not, they don't deviate from that. So there's an agreed on, if you will, there's an agreed on situation that we're not departing from that. So that does mean something. I mean, that is significant. Think about it. If you're going to kill a king, but you're still going to replace him with a member of that family, that means that people have enough respect for that system that they don't want to stop that system from happening. Which to me tells me, in the back of my mind, what's really happening here is that people have agreed to this system. They've bound themselves to this system. They're going to follow this system, even if they don't like the people that are in the system.
I think there's another dynamic.
What's that?
I think you have to look at the agenda of the people who are writing it down. If we assume this is not objective history, that this is that this is being written to create legitimacy for the priestly class, that's right. To interpret all, and the Northern Kingdom and the Southern Kingdom are chaotic.
Yeah, but you're 100% right, except for one thing. You didn't go far enough. They're finish. So finish.
You interrupted.
So finish that thought. I hope everyone can hear what. Speak up, Ronnie, so people can hear it.
Party, the priests and the Sunday legitimacy, religious legitimacy. They have to be working within a system of the Davidic kingdom.
Yes, that's the point. That's 100% the point. So what Ronnie just said again, 100. Well, you said the whole thing. You didn't go far enough at first, which is yes, the system will work with the Davidic king because the priests say that that's what you have to have. This is a complete affirmation of the priest power, not the power of David, which I find really interesting because it really tells you who's really in power. So Ronnie's first point is they wrote the story. We know they wrote the story. This is propaganda and this is their agenda, 100%. But it's not just an agenda. It's not just propaganda because it's actually 100% what's actually happening. It's not perception. It's the 100% reality because the priest and the priestly system that is partners with the Davidic line basically says this system will work as long as there's a Davidic king in and we're the ones in power. And both of those things have to happen. And so they make sure that there's always a Davidic heir there because they're not going to replace the king with somebody who's not from the line of David.
So in other words, it's not just that everyone agreed that this was the system that was intended by God. It's that the priests themselves made sure that someone in the Davidic line came to power because that was essential for them to be legitimate.
Correct. The whole system has to go together. And so this is a system which is assured to be in power. This isn't a coincidence and it's not an agenda. And you can't even say it's God's will because the Bible itself says that these people took the guy out and killed him. It doesn't say God said that they're supposed to be killed. It says what happens. The Bible is pretty straightforward about what happens. The courtiers took the guy out and killed him. But they took him out and killed him and they allowed it to happen. The priests allowed it to happen or encouraged it to happen. And again, it was all done with the understanding that the next person we'll see if we can do better with the next person. But yeah, the system has to work. The system has to be in place. The system, it's inherent to the system that the priests need to have a Davidic king on the throne. No matter what, the person has to be a line of David. And you saw it last week, especially when you have a priest that literally raises young King Yoram is raised by the priests from the time he was a baby until he was installed as a 7-year-old monarch. He is taken care of by the king, by the priests. Jehoiada raises the kid and completely keeps the kid under his thumb. And even as the kid starts to assert himself, they have to get in there and occasionally get rid of the king. But it's pretty obvious. This isn't just propaganda. It is propaganda, but it's not just propaganda. It's part of what has to happen. The priests have to have a king of David. So they bring him back. The body is brought back. And here's what happens.
Then all the people of Judah took Azariah, who was 16 years old, and proclaimed him king to succeed his father Amaziah. It was he who rebuilt Elat and restored it to Judah after King Amaziah slept with his fathers.
Yeah. And he slept with his fathers because they killed him, but he's sleeping. He's just sleeping. But no, they make him king and he's 16. His father was 29 when he became king. He's 16 when he becomes king. And his grandfather was 7 when he became king. So these are priests that are literally saying, we better get to this guy really young and make sure we groom him and make sure that he does what we want him to do. I mean, I don't know what else to tell you. It's right here. You don't have to dig deep to figure out what's going on here. And it's troubling. It's not good. I mean, I'm not saying it's good, but this is what's really happening. I mean, you don't have to interpret this, is what I'm saying. It's pretty much right here.
In the 15th year of King Amaziah, son of Joash of Judah, King Jeroboam, son of Joash of Israel, became king in Samaria for 41 years. He did what was displeasing to the Lord. He did not depart from all the sins that Jeroboam, son of Nebat, had caused Israel to commit.
Yeah, so Jeroboam ben Joash is just like Jeroboam ben Nebat. They are both not good in the sense that they make people worship in the north, and he's not a good guy, except for the fact that he's king for 41 years, which is a lot longer than the kings of Judah are surviving, and he seems to have done a much better job of ruling than the other guys in Judah. Why? Because you know what? The northern kings, for all their displeasing God, they don't have priests to deal with who are there making sure that if somebody gets out of line, we're going to kill him. They don't have enough power. The Levites and the Kohanim in the north don't have enough power to do this. The kings in the north rule pretty much unimpeded and without challenge, without another power. Prophets are there. The prophets seem to be very active actually in the north. There are prophets in the south. We haven't been reading about them, but they are there. We're about to read about them. But again, that's what we read about again, Jeroboam not being a good king. But let's read also what he did.
It was he who restored the territory of Israel from Lebo Hamath to the Sea of the Arabah, in accordance with the promise that the Lord, the God of Israel, had made through his servant, the prophet Jonah, son of Amittai, from Gath-hepher. Yeah,
it's that prophet, that Jonah, that guy, that Jonah. He's back. No, he's not back. This is the first time we actually read about him. We read about him later in the book of Jonah, but this is what we know about Jonah. Here, that's it. We don't really know much about him other than this is his father, Jonah ben Amittai from Gath-hepher, which is the same Jonah. And he's a prophet like Elijah and Elisha in the north. Wow. What do we know about Jeroboam? He's really successful at extending the kingdom of the north, because he goes all the way from Lebanon all the way down to the Sea of Arabah, which is the Red Sea. So this guy conquers a whole lot of territory. This is a guy who makes Israel very strong. And he has this prophet Jonah there. And what does it say?
For the Lord saw the very bitter plight of Israel, with neither bond nor free left, and with none to help Israel. And the Lord resolved not to blot out the name of Israel from under heaven, and he delivered them through Jeroboam, son of Joash.
Now, he wasn't literally, again, the deliverer of Israel, but he is, again, by Southern writers, by the judgment of the writers in the South, he's a pretty powerful king. Yeah. And, the fact that they really can't bash him other than the fact that he has people continue to worship in the north. Look what it says.
The other events of Jeroboam's reign and all his actions and exploits, how he fought and recovered Damascus and Hamath for Judah in Israel, are recorded in the annals of the kings of Israel.
Yeah, now here's a little interesting note. Why does it say for Judah in Israel, right? And it says, did he fight for Judah or did he fight for Israel? What's the King James say there? Mary? Yeah, so either there are territories that Judah had in the north that he was able to recover, or he, his victories were also for Judah in a way. I would say this, if he does away with enemies that are on the eastern side of the Jordan River, the Edomites, the Moabites, the Ammonites, those people on the other side, then it's a victory for Judah to some extent as well. But this is pretty substantial, because what it says right here is that he recovered Damascus. He recovered Damascus and Hamath. Now, did he really go all the way to Damascus? That's the capital of Aram. So it's probably a little bit of an exaggeration. It's probably not all the way to Damascus. Damascus, by the way, is not that far. The distance from Damascus to the Golan Heights has been pointed out. It's 40 or 50 miles. It's not far. That's why during the Yom Kippur War and in the 67 war, both times, Syria was very afraid that Israel was going to march right up to Damascus. They could have. Once you capture the Golan Heights, it's a straight shot to Damascus. Yeah, I did. Something's going on. So Damascus is maybe the environs of Damascus, outside of Damascus, but this is a pretty substantial expansion of the northern kingdom. Look, to some extent, this is the extension of the kingdom during the time of David and Solomon. So maybe again, looking at the expansion of Israel, the northern kingdom, the people in the south said it's an expansion of Judah, of David's kingdom. I don't know. So it's a weird line, and some people say it's a scribal error, that it actually should say, it should say to Israel and not to Judah, but that's what we have. The fact is that, again, did the people in the south see these as victories that helped them as well? And here's what it says.
Jeroboam slept with his fathers, the kings of Israel, and his son Zechariah succeeded him as king.
Yeah. And so seems like the north is doing better than the south right now. It appears to me that they are. we're going to read a little bit more. And this is the end of chapter 15, but the end of chapter 14, beginning of chapter 15. We won't get through the end of chapter 15, but we're going to start now and start chapter 15. And this transition period will, at least, I guess we'll kind of cross over into that right now, but let's read a little bit more.
In the 27th year of King Jeroboam of Israel, Azariah, son of King Amaziah of Judah, became king. He was 16 years old when he became king, and he reigned 52 years in Jerusalem. His mother's name was Yekoliah of Jerusalem.
So we learn her name. Again, the queen or the princess's name, at least the queen or whatever, his mother's name. Doesn't say that she's actually queen, I want to say. But yes, he reigns a really long time, which is easier to do when you're 16 years old and you don't wind up like your father and grandfather in getting murdered. So he was 68 when he died. So his name is Azariah or Azariahu. He's name means with the help of Adonai, with the help of the Lord. And again, he takes over when he's very young. And let's look at what it says he does.
However, the shrines were not removed.
No, you left out the
He
good
did-
part.
Oh, he did what was pleasing to the Lord, just as his father Amaziah had done. However, the shrines were not removed. The people continued to sacrifice and make offerings at the shrines.
Yeah, and so this is an interesting thing about this this guy. Again, like his father before him, he is good, but he doesn't do completely good. He actually allows people to continue to worship, not only in Jerusalem. Now, what's interesting about this guy, what's a little different?
The Lord struck the king with a plague, and he was a leper until the day of his death. He lived in isolated quarters, while Yotam, the king's son, was in charge of the palace and governed the people of the land.
Yeah. So it seems as though, even though he doesn't get killed by his courtiers with the help of maybe the priests, I say maybe, pretty strongly indicated that the priest decided to be king, as we said, but he does get hit by a plague. Now, why does he get hit by a plague and none of the other people got hit by a plague? Now, here's what's interesting about it. Again, it says it's Metzorah, and he had it and never got cured of it. It's not leprosy, because he definitely wouldn't have been cured of leprosy. This seems to be a disease that he could have been healed from. It's the Metzorah disease, the disease that we've seen over and over again. The last time we saw it in the book of Kings, actually, we saw it with the lepers who were kept outside the camp and the city, and were the ones who were able to go to the Aramean camp and take the stuff when the Arameans left. We read about Naaman, who has leprosy or the disease. He comes down. Gehazi gets struck by it because he lies and says that he's supposed to pay for his healing. So we've seen this disease before. We've seen people have it. We saw Miriam had it. We see it in the book of Leviticus, where you can have it and you can be cured of it, not leprosy. We say that all the time. But this is interesting because it says that he has it and never gets cured of it. It's ongoing. He says he has it till he dies. And it says specifically, if you look here, well, it says the meaning of Hebrew uncertain. This is where we would look at this word. We look at this word. They translate it as isolated quarters. Beit hachafushit. What does your translation say, Mary? What does the King James say for isolated quarters? I guarantee it doesn't say isolated quarters. In a what house? It's definitely anybody else have a translation there that they wanted to share? He's in a place he's not probably in the palace. Or if he's in the palace, he's in a part of the palace that nobody else goes to.
He's being kept prisoner.
Maybe he's not allowed to come with other people, which means he really can't be king, which is what the Bible says, that his son really ruled in his place. So what's interesting about this guy, which is very unusual, not unique, not the only one, but he is sick while he's king, which is problematic, especially if you have a disease that forces you not to be in public or with being able to even be with other people. So the understanding here is that he's in seclusion, at the very least, but he's in a place where he will not get other people sick. There is no question that the writers of the Bible, the editors, the people who've passed this on, the text says this was God's work. This wasn't just he was sick. This was God's decision to make him sick. And so he doesn't really get to go. His son rules in his place.
The other events of Azariah's reign and all his actions are recorded in the annals of the kings of Judah. Azariah slept with his fathers, and he was buried with his fathers in the city of David. His son Jotam succeeded him as king.
Yeah. So he became king when he was 16. He dies when he's 68, but he dies of natural causes, of illness. I don't know if it's natural causes, it's supernatural cause, because I don't know that he died of this, by the way. It doesn't say he died of it, but he dies on a younger side of things, 68, and he dies, but he's not assassinated. Yeah. He could make the argument he didn't do anything to warrant assassination because he doesn't really rule. But it's a strange life. It's not a normal king's life. We really know nothing about him. We have literally 6 or 7 verses about this guy, Azariah. We don't really know. So his son Jotam becomes king, and he becomes king even during his father's life, which is unusual, that he becomes king while the guy is still alive. And here's what it says.
In the 38th year of King Azariah of Judah, Zechariah, son of Jeroboam, became king over Israel in Samaria for 6 months.
Yeah, this is the problem. We just left Judah and went back up north, and you can see that Zechariah, who is Jeroboam II's son, is only king for 6 months. And here's what happens.
He did what was displeasing to the Lord as his fathers had done. He did not depart from the sins which Jeroboam, son of Nebat, had caused Israel to commit. Shallum, son of Jabesh, conspired against him and struck him down before the people and killed him and succeeded him as king.
Ooh. Yeah, so that's the end of Jehu's reign. Jehu's reign just came to an end. And let's just put it up there for everybody to see. That is the end of the reign. Now, technically speaking, we'll read one more thing.
The other events of Zechariah's reign are recorded in the annals of the kings of Israel. This was in accord with the word that the Lord had spoken to Jehu. 4 generations of your descendants shall occupy the throne of Israel, and so it came about.
Yeah, and so this is what we heard. We heard that he was going to be able to stay in power for 4 generations. It seemed as though the 4 generations had elapsed, but they barely elapsed, in the sense that his great grandson Zechariah becomes king. We just zoom in on Jehu. Here we go. This is I have to put on the screen for everybody here. So Yehu becomes king after he kills Yoram. He becomes king. Then his son Jehoahaz becomes king. Then Joash becomes king. Then Jeroboam becomes king. And then Zechariah becomes king for just a matter of months. And then Shalom becomes king. But as you can see, and again, as I'm going to show people here who can't see this, during this time, and again, this is all happening during this is all happening during the king. It's all happening, all of this stuff during Jeroboam's time happens during
You got it.
Amaziah and Azariah, who's also known, I was going to say, as Uzziah. We'll explain that in a little bit. You can see how long Shalom is king for. Not a very long time. So here is Yehu.
Here.
There's Yehu. There is Jehoahaz, and there is Joash, Jeroboam II, Zechariah, who's king for a very short time, and Shalom, who's king for a very short period of time as well.
Even shorter.
Yeah. So as you can imagine, this did not work out very well. Here's what happens.
The other events of
Mhm.
Shalom's reign and the conspiracy that he formed are recorded in the annals of the kings.
Hold
of
on, we
Israel.
skipped over
skipped
one.
something, I think.
Sorry, here we go.
Oh.
One more.
Then Menachem, son of Gadi, sent out from Tirzah and came to Samaria. He attacked Shalom, son of Yabesh, in Samaria and killed him, and he succeeded him as king. The other events of Shalom's reign and the conspiracy that he formed are recorded in the annals of the kings of Israel.
Yeah, and so as you can see, that Shalom was the conspirator. He's right there. He conspires, he kills this guy,
He rules for what
and he
month?
ruled for a very short period of time before Menachem becomes king. And you can see Menachem becomes king, and he will be king for 10 years. His son, Pekahiah, becomes king for 2 years, and then another guy will take power from him. So Menachem is not king for very long, but here's the conspirator, Shalom. He kills Zechariah, and then he's killed almost immediately. This is very reminiscent of what we had seen up here, where Baasha's son Ella became king for less than a year. Zimri killed him, and then a week later, Omri killed Zimri and became king. So, and Omri started a dynasty, right? Omri's dynasty succeeds. So there is a theme here that occasionally happens in the north, or happened in the north, where a guy will kill the king and then he will be killed right after. The coup leader doesn't end up getting to stay in power. And this does happen oftentimes in it does happen in kingdoms, and it happens in countries, and it's happened in the Middle East actually. Not that long ago. It happened in Middle Eastern history as well. Specifically, it happened in Iraq. It happened in Syria. I'm talking about not the latest round of stuff in Syria, but if you look at when the I'll just show you if you look what happened to Syria, I'll just show you real quick as we're finishing. This is reminiscent of what happens when somebody becomes king. So here there was a coup in Syria in 1961. And then another coup in 1963. The Ba'ath Party took over. And there was another coup here, which was from 1966 till 1970. And then Hafiz al-Assad became the leader, and that was in 1970. And this guy, Hafiz al-Assad, was ruler of Syria until 2000. And then he was succeeded by, who became king of Syria? Not king, but yeah, his son. So you can see that he had all those roles until he was, the head of the Ba'ath Party. He was in the military, and then part of the first coup. Then there was another coup, and then he became the one in power. And after that, he was in power for 30 years. And now, as we said, as Ronnie pointed out, his son is now in power. So this is what happens when you're able to consolidate power. Another guy who was able to come to power after a series of coups was this guy. So right here. So yeah, he came to power in the Ba'ath Party in Iraq. They started a series of revolts, plotters. It says right here. In 1968, he participated in a bloodless coup led by al-Bakr, who overthrew Arif. And then, of course, Saddam was able to take power from him. And then, of course, he tried to install his own children, and that was not successful because we took him out of power. The United States took him out of power. So this idea of succession and how people become powerful in the Middle East is, again, this is what's happened in the two neighboring kingdoms or countries on the east of Israel. Jordan hasn't had that because they've had a monarchy, and Lebanon hasn't had that because they've had pretty much constant civil war for the last 50 years. That was the alternative. But the other two countries in the Middle East had this. Egypt has had a series of strongmen that have ruled the country since Nasser, since these days too. They had the brief time when the Muslim Brotherhood took power, but other than that, Egypt has had a series of military dictators that have come about through coups. So that's what happens in the Middle East. I mean, this story is actually not uncommon in the Middle East. Again, the exceptions to it really are Jordan and Lebanon, and those are not great examples of democracy, if you will.
Saudi Arabia.
In Saudi Arabia, which is also one of the neighboring kingdoms, and Saudi Arabia has just had a series of brothers take over from their brother when their brother died. And now there's a question of who will take over and how that transition will come. I will tell you this, don't assume that it's going to be the people that they think will be, because as much as he's tried to consolidate power, I wouldn't count out anybody killing somebody in Saudi Arabia and taking power. I will tell you 100% possible for it to happen. It's not necessarily going to happen, but 100% possible to happen, because they do it, they've done it, and it happens. That happens to be the way the Middle East generally will function when these countries don't have a history of democracy and don't have a way of transitioning power other than through coups, because you can't really have elections. The elections don't mean anything. So thank you, everybody, for being a part of today's, I know that there was a lot of kings and we read through a lot of stuff in those 3 chapters. Look, I think if you take away, Ronnie's lesson for us, which is that the priests were the ones who are in power. And how do we know that, at least in the South? Because even when a king is deposed, he's replaced with another king of the Davidic line of that line. Next week, we will be having class, but we'll be virtual. Virtual.
I'm gonna be.
You're going to be in Denver, so you can come on virtual. I know the Nathans won't want to come on, but everybody, come tonight to the Fablemans to see the story of Steven Spielberg, the king of film. If you're with us, we tried to have a dinner before. We worked hard, right, John, to try to have a dinner before.
You know what?
We did, but no replies.
Anybody could probably join us, and there's one right there at.
Okay, so Marcia just said some of her Havara is going to Rustic Burger.
Yeah, and
It's
right
it's
there.
actually called Cedar and Pine now, I think.
Well,
Or they're both called that, whatever. Look, we worked
Rosemary.
real hard. John tried to get a place and we tried to get a place and
Oh, okay.
they were not, they don't seem to
Rosemary,
want to have
is
our
it called
business.
Cedar and Pine? or
It
is
still says Rustic Burger, but
Oh,
also
okay.
says Cedar and Pine.
Oh,
Like
Lebanon?
I'm just saying, if you
Yeah,
look,
it's the-
if you look it up, it might say Rustic Burger, but also might say Cedar and Pine.
Meeting at 5:00.
Everybody, we'll see you later. Tomorrow night too, or Wednesday night, our Torah study. So take care, everybody.
Study.
Goodbye.